We begin this hour with two big stories we're following. First, a federal appeals court has ordered a judge to drop the charges against former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. In a 2-to-1 ruling, the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia granted Flynn's motion to dismiss the case. You'll remember, Flynn pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI about his conversations with the Russian ambassador before President Trump took office. He was the only White House official to be charged in Robert Mueller's Russia investigation. While all that transpired, lawmakers heard extraordinary allegations from a federal prosecutor who helped convict President Trump's longtime ally and confidant, Roger Stone. Aaron Zelinsky told members of the House Judiciary Committee he faced pressure from the, quote, highest levels of the Justice Department to go easy on Stone. Zelinsky also claims Stone received favorable treatment during sentencing because of his close ties to the president. Take a listen.
I believe that was wrong, and together with my fellow line prosecutors, I immediately and repeatedly said so. Unfortunately, our objections were not heeded. First, we were pressured to reduce the initial sentencing guidelines calculation for Mr. Stone without any clear legal rationale for doing so. When we refused to go along, we were instructed instead to disregard the guidelines entirely and to recommend an unspecified lower sentence for Mr. Stone. I was told that to the best of anyone's recollection, such a recommendation has never been made by the Fraud and Public Corruption section of the United States Attorney's Office. When we again refused, we were told that we could be fired if we didn't go along. I notified the office that I intended to withdraw from the case rather than file a memo that was the result of wrongful political pressure. And while all this was happening, I was repeatedly told the department's actions were not based on the law or the facts, but rather on political considerations, Mr. Stone's political relationships, and that the acting U.S. attorney was afraid of the president.
Earlier, I spoke with Keir Dougall. He is a former federal prosecutor and current CBSN legal contributor. I want to ask you first about the breaking news involving Michael Flynn. A federal appeals court has ordered all charges against the former national security advisor to be dropped. You'll recall he pleaded guilty to making false claims to the FBI. So, Keir, how exactly did the court come to this decision?
The court relied on a presumption that the Justice Department's motion to dismiss was regular. And granted this presumption of regularity to the motion that would dismiss the charges. That's the principal basis, or one of the principal bases, upon which the court decided that a hearing should not be held, and that this panel, it's just a panel of the appellate court, not the entire court itself, ruled that the hearing should not go forward and that Mr. Flynn's criminal case should be dismissed.
So is Flynn now entirely off the hook, or could he still face some legal challenges going forward?
Well, if this panel decision, in which there was a dissent, there were 3 judges, 2 ruled to dismiss the case and short-circuit the hearing based on a presumption of regularity, as we just discussed. If they have the last word, then yes, it's over. But there may be a so-called on-bank review where all of the judges at the appeals court can step in and basically make another ruling. So no, Mr. Flynn is not completely out of the woods yet.
All right. So switching gears now to today's hearing on Capitol Hill, is there anything you heard from Aaron Zelinsky that stood out to you as a former federal prosecutor?
Yeah, we heard the testimony that he gave about the completely irregular process. He said it was unprecedented, unheard of, that in the sentencing proceedings for Mr. Stone, where the senior leadership at the Justice Department overruled the prosecutors who had tried the case to mischaracterize the so-called guidelines, which are sort of the base set of rules for sentencing of all defendants, to try to place the case on an even playing field with every other defendant, so that the judge can then make decisions about what the appropriate sentence is. that Mr. Zelinsky's testimony is really quite shocking about the procedure that occurred that led to that overriding filing. The other thing I think that was really surprising is that Judge Mukasey, someone who is widely respected, spent 19 years on the bench, also testified today that he had never seen a case where a procedure like this had been used. So Mr. Zelinsky's testimony about how really unheard of it is to have the senior leadership overrule under these circumstances the line prosecutor's recommendation, that was really stunning.
So aside from this being unusual, I want to get to whether it's illegal, if true, because we did hear Zelinsky say he believes that Roger Stone was treated differently because of his relationship with President Trump. So if that is true, is that not illegal, Keir?
So it is, as Mr. Zelinsky testified, it's unethical and it's wrong. And so, if there's an effort to obstruct the proceeding here, it could potentially be illegal if there is an effort to obstruct the proceeding. But I think that the larger issue to focus on here, Tanya, is just how that it's wrong, that it flies in the face of our understandings of that we're, as a country, we're ruled by laws, not the whims of individual people or presidents, that the law is supposed to apply even-handedly. And what's truly shocking is the testimony that that Stone got preferential treatment because he is a pal of President Trump.
So, Keir, a spokeswoman from the DOJ said Attorney General Barr did not discuss Stone's sentencing with President Trump or anyone else at the White House, for that matter. In fact, she also claims many of Zelinsky's allegations are based on hearsay and not firsthand knowledge of conversations. How might that factor into all of this?
So, look, I would be surprised if the Attorney General wasn't aware of the public statements that President Trump made and had been making about Mr. Stone. So it doesn't necessarily require a direct conversation between Mr. Barr and President Trump for Mr. Barr to become aware of what President Trump's wishes are. That doesn't seem terribly of much moment to me. Now, Mr. Zelinsky is doing what every careful lawyer does. He's not testifying about things that he doesn't know about. He's testifying about the things that he does know about. And we can look at the two filings. We can look at the filing that was initially given to the court, and then we can look at the one that was submitted later by the senior leadership of the Justice Department. And you can look at the differences between the two filings and understand what happened.
So what could be the ultimate result of all of this? Let's say everyone hears this testimony and decides, yes, this was unethical, but now what?
So, look, I think what we're seeing in the Judiciary Committee is an effort to inform the public about concerns about politicization of the Justice Department. So there are potentially political consequences. The Justice Department itself has some internal procedures. If there are irregularities or wrongdoing, it's possible that the Justice Department itself may look at these things. There's an Inspector General, there's an Office of Professional Responsibility. So there are internal checks at the Justice Department that may come into play here.
But Keir, what happens if those internal checks are in a Justice Department where the head of the Justice Department is also, some would say, acting questionably?
Right. So, Tanya, you're getting to effectively a conflict of interest concern. That, the watchers of the watchers are being controlled by the people who are the subject of the investigation. I mean, we've long known, right? This is not a new idea that if you control an investigation, if you can select the evidence of the person or the things that are being investigated, you're not going to find very much. And so there is a concern, one that I think the House Judiciary Committee is trying to highlight here about politicization and lack of independence at the Justice Department, which creates the possibility that we don't get the full facts.
Well, Keir Dougall, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your legal expertise on these thorny issues with us. Thank you so much.